Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the BFG Podcast. Today I'm here with Jonathan and Jacob Spoonley, who is a commentator for Sky Sport, the general manager of the Players Association, and he's a former player as well. So welcome, Jacob. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
You've done very well with elongating that, Blake. It's lovely to be here, and I'm looking forward to this.
So let's start with the Players Association, if you don't mind. Please feel free not to comment on anything you don't want to comment on. So this year we had the issues around players. We had some incidents around players in the Phoenix women's squad. So how can we improve player payment and funding so that we don't have the continuous issues like what happened in the Phoenix camp this season, especially with the women?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are some really important issues and obviously very relevant at the moment. If we kind of pause, it's a little bit of a complicated landscape. So I'm the general manager for the New Zealand Players Association, and our remit, kind of like our core responsibility, if you will, is around the All Whites and the football ferns, so very much national team focused. If you want to compare the A-League to another competition, it's very similar to the NRL. And what I mean by that is the primary responsibility for running the competition, but also representing the players, sits in Australia. So my colleagues, Bo Bush and Kate Gill, and their wonderful team out of Melbourne, they're actually responsible for the issues like player payment, like workplace conditions for the Wellington Phoenix, and will be for Auckland Football Club. So if I just kind of selfishly talk about what it is that we do, what we do is we work alongside Bo and Kate in relation to providing services to the players on this side of the Tasman, but then we're also very focused on supporting our players in the national teams, wherever they may be in the world. And if we step back and look at it, our organization's been going for a while now. It was started by the infamous Jeremiah Nata and also Andrew Scott Howman a number of years ago. And they, in the background, have been doing some very powerful work. They're not the most self-promoting of people, but I think it's really important that you give people flowers where they're due. And people like Ash and Harry and Ivan Visilic and Sarah Gregorius, obviously, have put a lot of effort into ensuring things as simple as having the players on a joint collective bargaining agreement, which means that the football ferns and the All Whites are employed on the same terms by New Zealand Football. And we're actually going through the process of we're looking at those employment terms at the moment, so it's quite poignant. What I would say in relation to player payment and the equality or equity between men and women, particularly in the A-League, it's a bit of a journey. And I think we, as a generation at the moment, are trying to solve an issue that really should have been solved a lot longer ago. The accelerator is clearly being pushed, and events like the World Cup mean that there's a much sharper focus on how we are commercializing the game, particularly the women's game. And I think although we've got that kind of compounded challenge, if you will, we're also very much into solutions. And I'd say the one way that fans can really get behind that push for equality, that very important push for equality, is by continuing to engage in the game, continuing to push the numbers, because that's where other commercial entities get really interested. People like banks obviously want to access as larger audience as possible. And then we've got a number of other commercial partners that I'm sure would like to invest in the game, but need to see the way in which it benefits them. So that symbiosis, I think, is something that we really need to emphasize. And I think we're still going through a process of exploring it. Equally, we want good governance. And I think over the past 5 to 10 years, we haven't seen that, particularly in the divorce between the A-Leagues and Football Australia. So the competition is trying to stand up on its own 2 feet at the moment, but there have been some stumbles. And that is not a foundation that we need when we are trying to elevate football in this part of the world.
It's interesting you say that because, former CEO Danny Townsend is a good friend of the program, and he had a lot of things to say on the way out to me, because we keep in touch, and he has a lot of things to say about his time there. So it's very interesting when you say about the fallout. So yeah, you're not the only one. But anyway, you said you're responsible for the 2 national teams. So going back to that, we had that incident, I think it was in Qatar last year, maybe the year before. We had to stop a game at halftime. So same sort of question really. How do we get those controversial nations to not have incidents like this?
It's a really good question, Blake, and I'm like you. I can't actually remember exactly when it was. They all seem to blur into one at the moment. But I think you're referring to the incident that occurred in Vienna where the All Blacks played Qatar, and one of the Qatari players was alleged to have made a racist comment towards Michael Boxall. I think in that regard, if I was to start from my position as a former player, and you don't stop being an All White, you just stop playing. I was really proud of the team. They reacted to an event that very much crossed the line. They did so in an organised way. They did so in a uniformed, universal type approach where there was consultation with the team with very clear leadership taken. And together with the staff, they made the decision that they would engage in conversation to try and resolve the matter, to allow it to be investigated later on. They simply weren't able to meet in the middle, shall we say. And at that point, they decided that they weren't going to continue with the second half. I think what's not appreciated is the work that was done on the spot in real time, basically within the window of half time, to try and resolve the matter, to try and continue the game. But obviously a lot of the headlines were about the All Whites not playing, and I think very much justified, because they had the options taken off the table. So fully support what the players did. However, there is the issue around racism and it being inherent in sport, not just football, I've got to say. It is something that I think exists in a number of different codes. And in football, we have to take responsibility for it being involved in our sport. And I would say that the boys decided that they had had enough. They were going to draw the line, and they are a very cosmopolitan team. I think there's something like 30 different ethnicities represented in the wider All White squad. And within that particular group, we had, I think, about 5 or 6 Polynesian players, a decent cohort of Samoans, but then Cook Islanders. There's obviously, in addition to that, Māori players as well. So that's kind of our local ethnic flavour, if you will. And then you add to that the likes of Sarpreet Singh, who's got an Indian background. And there really wasn't any choice, as I say. The players are made up of different ethnicities. One of the non-negotiables is that you don't get discriminated. In actual fact, we buy into that, we lean into it. It's part of what the All Whites are. It's part of their DNA, is that cosmopolitan, diverse, diversity. And fully back what the boys did. How do we solve it? We need FIFA to have to provide consequences, and to provide consequences with teeth. A flaccid investigation simply wasn't the way to go, and that's what we saw. So, if nothing else, off the back of the incident, was that it is the most recent exposing of a very flawed system.
So do comment before I hand over to Jonathan on this section. So what would your message be to the president, and do you believe how much pressure is there on you at halftime to get that message out? Because you talked about the short window. So how did you go through that process of getting that tweet out or Instagram post or thing about the decision that you had made?
Look, it's a great question again, and I think it probably demonstrates that a lot of pressure is on the players. It's the players that have to act. They can't rely on a system. They can't rely on a governance structure that means that they are supported in that particular moment. You take any other workplace and you'll have human resources, you'll have management systems, you'll have different structures that mean that the person that has been victimized doesn't actually have to advocate on their own behalf and doesn't have to prosecute the situation. That didn't happen in Vienna. It was the players together with the staff, and I'm not excluding them. It's just my area of responsibility. Most of my engagement was through the players. They had to make the decision on the spot. They made the decision to act, and they chose the way in which they were going to act against an allegedly an abhorrent act. It shouldn't have been down to them. That's the end of it. There should be systems in place so that we can police these sorts of issues independent of the players.
And do you have a message for the president?
Oh, sorry, apologies. I forgot the first part of the question. So I take it we're talking about Gianni Infantino. Is that who we're talking about?
Yeah, FIFA president.
Yeah. I'd simply say to him that he has, he's been very powerful when he has spoken on this matter. We now want to see action off the back of that, and we want to understand the protections that will be in place and the way in which the governance structures will be implemented. It's really, really simple. We can't keep talking in headlines. Like, we need to start acting on these sorts of things.
Yeah. I'll hand over to Jonathan to see if he has any follow-ups on this section, and then we'll move into your commentary and your playing.
Cool. A quick question about governance. So we touched on the APL and Football Australia. What's the feeling like around football? New Zealand football. What's the governance structure like? Is it going well? I mean, they went through a few bumps and they've kind of come out the other side, and things appear to be going well. What's your take? What's your view?
It's an interesting one. I think I'm an advocate for always kind of reflecting on how things are going, and sometimes the structures themselves don't get as much scrutiny because we tend to look at the people that are operating within them and their performance. I would be quite keen to move away from a system where the kind of the democratic element is those that receive funding from the national body then vote on the national body. So it's quite cyclical in that regard. And that probably speaks to a reality that existed up to 15, 20 years ago. But with the kind of hyper-professionalization of sport, leagues, but also national teams, I think that you need to work towards a more kind of diverse, perhaps commercially focused approach. And you need to have representation in your governance that aligns with that. Particularly for New Zealand, Jonathan. So you can see rugby going through the same challenges on a much larger scale at the moment, where they want to commercialise, but those that are responsible for commercialising the game so that the All Blacks can continue to compete and largely dominate on the international scene are people that perhaps don't have the skill set. They are very much representation of the unions, of the regions. So how do we get the balance right? Because you need both. At the end of the day, it's a national organisation. It's there to represent a wide range of people. But at the same time, you can only truly do that if you have the appropriate skill set and also the money in the bank, is the reality.
So you talked about your playing career and your commentary. You often...
I didn't, Blake. I don't talk about my playing career that much. It was all you. But if you've got, what have we got? We're 90 seconds. I think we can get the playing career out of the way in 90 seconds, Blake.
You correct me if I'm wrong, but I looked it up. You played for Auckland and the All Blacks, right? Yeah. So, what are those experiences like?
Yeah, I was quite fortunate. I was the first generation that came through once Australia had left Oceania. So opportunities were provided to me that previous generations had to basically fight for. So quite fortunate in that regard. I went to the Under-20 World Cup in Canada. That was a great experience. I'd been to a number of different clubs on kind of extended trials. So the likes of Manchester City, Birmingham City, in the lead up to the Under-20 World Cup. And then off the back of that, I had the opportunity to go to America as part of the college kind of option. I signed for the Phoenix. I think in retrospect, that probably wasn't the best move because I was only there for, I think, 18 months or 2 years or something like that. So perhaps the sequencing wasn't quite right there. And then kind of kept fighting for that professional opportunity. Didn't really happen. So ended up going to law school. But what I think I really benefited from is understanding the challenges that young Kiwis face when they do go overseas. I've failed a tremendous amount, which is great. So I can have empathy for a bunch of different situations. And the players that are going overseas at the moment, they're a lot better equipped, a lot better tooled to adjust quickly to the experiences, the greater demands in Europe. So that's probably the most valuable part of my career. I think the highlight definitely was, though, the penalty shootout win against Cruz Azul in Morocco. So that was a wonderful experience. And going to the Olympics. Sorry, those are two kind of bright stars in a pretty faded constellation, Blake.
You don't give yourself enough credit, Jacob. You're a good player.
Oh, thank you very much, mate. I appreciate that.
So you talk. Sorry, we're jumping back a bit here, but you talk about the young players, and a bit earlier we were talking about, the implications on New Zealand football. Would you like to see a concept similar to what they used to have in the NRL, where, and I know they've tried it before, but it kind of flopped, where they have each A-League club have like an under-20s team that is shown on TV?
I think it would definitely add to the players' development. I think on both sides of the Tasman at the moment, we've got a very fractured operating space. We've got almost competitions competing with each other. In Australia, you've got the remnants of the NSL and the state leagues. They see themselves as kind of like the rightful owners of the history of Australian football. And then you've got the A-League, which is the kind of great leap forward, if you will. So I think it was a necessary part of moving forward. One thing that's probably not appreciated is that back in the early 2000s, the players through the PFA in Australia got together and they actually voted on whether or not they'd support a new league coming in. And I think it was pretty overwhelming that they said that the NSL was so flawed that it couldn't continue. So everyone that's kind of looking back and with gold-tinted, rose-tinted glasses perhaps forgets the key challenges that competition had. So I think we're still going through the process of kind of getting that right calibration. But to come back to your point, Blake, the youth team, I think it would be fantastic, but it's going to take some pretty delicate diplomacy at times. And I think the question for us, if we look at it from a selfish point of view, what does it mean for New Zealand? And it's costly enough sending the senior teams across to Australia every second week, doing that on a multiple of 2 with youth teams. And I suppose that'd have to be, sorry, I don't suppose, I would presume that'd have to be the men's and the women's. So you're looking at an additional 50 people that would be going to Australia every second week. What does that mean? And then what does the corresponding cost mean for the Australians? Is that something that they can even contemplate at the moment, given their current financial reality over there? I'm not sure, but there's got to be a solution in there. And what we're seeing from the Phoenix at the moment is that the pathway is pretty good. They're producing players that can step up into the first team space relatively easily in the men's side. On the women's side, I think we're seeing that starting to come alive as well. Daisy Brazendale, for example, is somebody that I didn't have much information on at the start of the season. Towards the end of the season, understood her as a player, and then the firework, the absolute kind of crown on the jewel at the moment is obviously Macy Fraser spends a season with the Phoenix and then breaks the league record for transfer to one of the strongest competitions in the world in the NWSL. I mean, that's almost fairy tale stuff in some regards.
Mm-hmm. So you do your commentary for Sky Sport along with your great mate Goran Paladin. So how do you, because you talk about you're not allowed to comment on player signings and all that kind of stuff. So when they speculate on commentary, how do you sort of find yourself dancing around that, really? Is it awkward for you?
Not at all. And I think it's something that people assume quite a bit. If I have been working on a deal in the background, then it's really simple. I just don't talk about it. You wait for somebody else. You don't need to be the person breaking the news. You can just kind of sit there and be the second or third person to comment about what's available publicly, and just get led by the players, what they say, and then also the clubs. So that's really, it's probably a very unsexy, not very romantic response, but it's a really straightforward one. You just can't comment on it.
So what's your favourite part about doing the commentary? Because my favourite ones are your pre-shows. You're very good at those. Your knowledge is incredible. So I really enjoy the banter between you and Green and Peloton and the whole team. So that's really good. So what made you want to get into the media side of the industry? Is that something you've already always had a passion for, or?
So apologies if you're picking up. I've got a border collie in the background, so she's going in and out the door at the moment. So apologies if you're hearing that. She's 18 months old, Blake. So she's still very much in that kind of Tyrannosaurus Rex puppy phase.
Wow.
To answer the question, why did I get into it? I think it was something that we kind of constantly talked about in the change room at Auckland City, is that we wanted to watch the Phoenix, but there were at times things that we didn't feel were accurate. And Adam McGeorge, Alex Fenerides, and I ended up borderline bullying Ricky Van Steeden, who was the producer and director of football at the time, about certain aspects of it. And then Dennis Katsanos just asked me if I'd like to be involved in a broadcast, and I said yeah, and enjoyed it. They seemed to enjoy it, and it went from there. It's there's no real system behind it. It's just, do you like it? Is there an opportunity? Is there another opportunity? But if I can, mate, and I'd love to talk about this for just a moment.
Yeah.
The team that we've got at Sky at present has been something that has come about through the work of Dennis Katsanos and Hiromai Nata and Fred de Jong. They came before us. Absolutely need to acknowledge that. At the same time, people like Rob Quinn, who's the producer for football, Kingsley Hockley and Blair Dainty, the guys that you don't see, the ones that are in the truck that are pushing the buttons, they are also our producing team. And they've set up an environment which is really kind of egoless, and the right idea wins. The right people kind of get given opportunities, and if they do well, they get the opportunity to grow. And we've almost it's almost a bit of a how do I say this, a group where you need to kind of be accepted by everybody to continue. They're not going to put the chemistry at risk just to have a big name, let's say. And we haven't had that. That's just a hypothetical example. So Paul Eiffel, Anna Green, Kirsty Yallop, Piney, for example. Sorry, another one. Goran Paladin. I mean, there's a kind of a cohort that gets rotated around, and I love it. That's one of the reasons why I do it, is because you get to work with these fantastic people. And I think as well, there's a lot of ambition within our group, which we hope matches what is happening on the field at the moment. We want to bring sophisticated answers. We want to bring analysis and depth to conversations. We want to bring to light these wonderful stories that are inherent and that are part of the DNA of our footballing culture. And also we want to grow it. We've got phenomenal fans, some of the best fans in the competition. If you ask Piney, he would say the best fans in the competition, and I'd find it really hard to argue with them, especially with what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. But we want more airtime. We want more chances to grow this out and to provide you with something to watch. Then I think, just really, really selfishly from my perspective, the one thing that I do love doing is discussing how particularly Giancarlo Italiano is looking to utilize this team. What is he doing? How is he getting these answers? When you look at it in real time, the eye test suggests that there's some sort of familiarity, there's some continuity in terms of what's going on. But what is it? What's the foundation? What's the thing that you perhaps missed because you only saw the goal, or what's something that was just off to the side in the peripheral, which meant that the goal was an opportunity at that particular point in time? So love talking with Ify and Greenie about that sort of stuff, because they bring a very different perspective than I do. And we've had some brilliant discussion points this year. So it's been really cool, and the broadcast, I think, I hope will continue to grow if I'm involved or if I'm not. But it's something that perhaps in a bit of a sweet spot at the moment for what it is. Now, how do we get it up to the next level?
Yeah, and I must admit, I was skeptical of the system at the start of the season when it comes to the Phoenix. And that's a good lead-in, because we can finish with this talking about the upcoming finals. So I was a bit skeptical, because I'm not a great fan of the youth coming ahead of experience, and I was so concerned, like a lot of people. But they've just, unfortunately, proved everybody wrong, because I did not think it would work. I was one of those.
You got to stop listening to the Australians, Blake. That's something that we need to correct.
I didn't get it from the Australians. It was a personal preference that I've always had. I'm not a great youth fan.
No, fair enough. If I can, the way that so over the last 18 months, we've been taking on a project in the background about what we want the New Zealand pathway to look like, and we've done so jointly with New Zealand Football. That means, how do we access talent? How do we refine it while it's here? And then how do we give it the best opportunity to transfer and be successful in those much more competitive markets? So basically, how do we follow the likes of Marcus Damonich, Joe Bell, Macy Fraser? I think Anna Green is another great example, although I'm biased because work closely with her. But Abby Ursig is a Rhea Percival. We could go on. But how do we bottle that, basically? And what it's come down to, which I think is relevant to the Phoenix and helps explain why they have been successful, is that you need a long-term plan that you're aiming for. You need to have succession in place, and you need to create what's called cohesion, which is opportunity to play within the same system with the same operators. Sport often kind of treats itself different to business, but in actual fact, a lot of the business norms do apply. And what we're seeing, if you boil it all down, is that it's exactly the same as any other business. And if you look at the Phoenix team from the start of the season, they had that succession in place. I think Giancarlo Italiano was the first coach, and he was one of two, because Chris Greenacre's been in the club a long time, and I'm sure will do great when he steps up into a first team role. But this is the first time that they had options to transfer up from within the organization to take that top spot. So those coaches knew the system, they knew the environment, they knew what had happened before them, they weren't coming to it afresh. So they could acknowledge the past and also build upon it. Now, cohesion. The academy's been rolling now for, I think, 6 to 8 years in the men's space. So what we're seeing, I think, is the first products that have actually really been crafted within the academy. And they've got that proximity to the first team. They can see what's happening. They can see what's been asked of them. They can see the systems that Giancarlo Italiano built upon. And then I think the second part to that is, this is something that I think I find frustrating. And I look at this generation jealously, like, put it out there. They have got the structures and the opportunities in place. They have the confidence of coaches to want to actually push them when they're younger, because you don't get better without being pushed. That didn't happen when I was coming into the Wellington Phoenix. Marco Rojas, Costa Barbarouses had to go elsewhere for opportunities.
Yeah.
You can say there wasn't the academy system in place, but I would say that they were still part of the squad. They should have been given a chance. And that's one of the real leap forwards that I think we're seeing at the moment. And the irony is, Blake, it's the Australians that are coming in and saying the Kiwis are actually decent footballers. So we've got Marco Rudan, who gave Alex Rufer his first chance, Ufuk Talay, who gave Ben Wayne, Libby Kakache, the kind of those big opportunities to get their moves overseas. And then Giancarlo Italiano has basically done the same on a kind of mass production scale. I think it's something like 11 players under the age of 22 have been given game time this year. And take Matt Sheridan, started it right back against Central Coast Mariners in one of the biggest games in the season, and was allowed to do so confidently. So that's kind of, if you will, in my mind, why the Wellington Phoenix have been successful. A lot of it actually isn't down to football. It's about the foundation that football then is built upon. And that, to me, signals maturity in our footballing industry.
And what I would say, just to close on that, is the reason I was hesitant is because I've always been fearful of youth saturation, because I'm always one of those fans that believes you need experience in the team as well. And the reason I was concerned was because they were signing all the youth players, and I was thinking, oh, there's not much experience there. They're gonna get like many others, they're gonna get slaughtered. They're gonna get, smashed all the time. But they just proved everybody wrong. But I still believe that they have to be careful of not oversaturating the youth going forward. Not just the Phoenix, but all the other A-League teams and national teams, and on and on and on. So yeah, that just
Blake, I think you're absolutely right. And I think you need to have both elements. You need to have that youthful exuberance, but you don't get the success without the likes of Tim Payne, Alex Rufer, David Ball, Costa Barbarouses, Scott Whitten. So the spine of the team is still there. And that allows the team to then kind of flower out with these opportunities for youthful players. So I think you're bang on the money, mate.
So just to finish, what are your hopes for the semi final? Because by the time this is out, we should have had maybe just before the first league, maybe just after the first league. So what are your hopes in preview?
My preview, right. Well, at the moment, we are pushing very hard to have a Kiwi build-up for the first leg, and that's something that we think is more than appropriate given the success of the team so far this season. So hopefully we get to hear us discussing the Phoenix going into Melbourne Victory at Amy Park before hearing us in the return leg. What I would like is a Phoenix side to not be overcome with the moment and everything that we're hearing out of the environment through Chiefy, through the senior players as much as anything, because they're surprised because nothing seems to phase the younger players. And apparently a lot of the kind of the cultural aspect of the team is now being driven by the younger generation, which is fantastic. And what they're saying is that they just don't get overawed. If you give them a plan, if you give them that kind of stability from a management, a leadership perspective, then they thrive, which is what I hope will happen this weekend. That said, Blake, a semi-final at Annie Park, which could be packed and rocking, is an intimidating environment to step into. This won't be what the Phoenix experienced at the start of the season when they drew 1-1 at Amy Park. This will be a demonstration, I think, of not only the power of Victory being one of the blue chip clubs in the competition, but also the pedigree. This will be a reminder about their history and what they've done to teams in the past, and that will be intimidating in moments. And it will literally be 11, 15 players up against 35, 40,000. So you have to be organized, you have to be resolute, and you have to be determined to get through that sort of environment. So I think this is probably going to be the biggest test of the Phoenix's collective mentality this season. That said, I don't think they fear anybody. I truly believe that there's a lot of confidence within this team, and if they can, suffer's used a lot in football, and I think suffer's the right word. If they can suffer through that first leg, and what I mean by that is put the work in, have the broad shoulders to take on the moment, and step up in the big moments. If that's scoring an away goal, if that's a goal line clearance, if that's that last 5-meter run to track an attacker to make sure that the ball or the play doesn't develop with the sort of quality that Victory will be hoping for, then I think that sets up a really exciting second leg in Wellington. And I don't know, you guys can probably tell me, I think they've already sold, was it 6,000 to 8,000 tickets, and we're still 10 days out, 2 weeks out. It's pretty phenomenal stuff. And what I'd love more than anything is to be flying into a Wellington, checking into the Ridges Hotel, and everything be decked out in black and yellow, and to walk into a Sky Stadium with the fans there an hour before, well lubricated, up for the moment, and then to enjoy the yellow fever, really kind of breathing life under the Phoenix's wings for them to take flight in that second leg. If we can get to Wellington with the game still intact, with the Victory still within striking distance, I think there will be a crescendo in that last half hour where they'll empty the tank.
Any final comments from you, Jonathan?
Just to basically, for me, just to acknowledge the work that you do, Jacob, and the team at Sky Sports. You've all been on as much as the game has been developing and the fan and the viewership's gone up. You guys are out there also doing the hard yards, doing the 1 a.m., 2 a.m. starts for the games where you're commentating overseas. So on behalf of, just Blake and I and the rest of our group who enjoy watching you and your commentary and the team, we just really want to acknowledge and thank you for all that you do, and also for the advocacy and the support that you give our players, developing through. It's not an easy pathway, but with players like yourselves who have been there and have the respect and the knowledge, it just means that we've got the up-and-coming talent. So, yeah, just really want to give you a shout-out for that stuff, for you and the team, and also how humble you are. You kind of downplay your influence and role. So just really want to acknowledge that.
No, thank you, Jonathan, and mate. Just part of a really cool team to operate in, both at the PFA and at Sky. So yeah, would love to kind of have you guys involved at some point if we do get that show back, or we get some extended airtime for a broadcaster. It would be wonderful, guys. So if you're up for that, please remind me at some point in the future.
Okay, I will do. Thank you for coming on today, Jacob. It was really your knowledge is extraordinary. Your passion for the game is undeniable. So thank you for your time.
Oh, likewise, guys. I think this is it's a lot of hard work that goes into a podcast, and just want to say that equally reiterate what Jonathan said, that it's not always acknowledged and kind of valued as it should be, but this is all part of the DNA of what I hope is really a blossoming football culture. So keep doing what you're doing, guys.
Yeah, like and subscribe this video, and we'll see you on the next one.